in Wiccan circles and in Druidry, where people would create a circle. But this essentially cuts out all middlemen. So you're not talking to the goddess of the waterfall or the tree, the elegy of it. But it's just trees, actually. It's very specifically connecting with Source through Mother Earth and through all the elements that exist through Mother Earth. There's 5, which is earth, air, fire, water, and spirit.
Welcome to Guide to Spirituality's podcast with me, Stacey Bauer. It's a down-to-earth space where we talk all things spiritual. Each episode, I'm joined by guests from all walks of life to share real experiences, practical tools, and honest conversations about healing, growth, and the unseen spiritual world. Whether you're just starting out or you're deep on your journey, this podcast is here to support your path with insight, connection, and that little bit of magic. Hello and welcome back. Today I'm chatting with somebody really special to me. We're chatting with Ali Wilkin. Ali has not only been my mentor, but she's the one who passed the Munay-Ki Rites to me and really helped me shift my spiritual path. Today we're talking about the Munay-Ki, what it actually is, where it comes from, and how it can support you in your everyday life and your spiritual journey. Let's go. Hi Ali, thank you very much for joining me today. Are you well?
I am. Hello, Stacey.
Hi. So Ali, for those that don't know, you are really my Munay-Ki mentor. Now, Munay-Ki, some people will be listening and going, what on earth is that? I have never, ever heard of it. How would you describe the Munay-Ki to somebody that's never heard about it before?
Okay, it is distilling it down to its simplest form. It's a body of prophecy and a body of processes that have been put together in modern times, but held for millennia by a group of people that traveled over from Indochina, more specifically the Indus Valley at the base of the Himalayas in northern India, which is now Pakistan. And this body of prophecy talks about a great change coming in the world from around 2012 onwards. And this group of people were kind of guided to guard this prophecy, to share it at a time when necessary. And also they were rewarded for their spirituality and their close relationship, natural relationship with the earth, with Mother Earth. They were rewarded with this body of prophecies, body of processes that enabled them to become like the new human to come in thousands of years in time. And these processes also aid the human soul, if you will, in living in an avatar, to live their life as close to Source as possible and with Mother Earth. That's because it's simple.
Yeah. Okay. So when I did my training, it obviously takes quite a long time. It takes, you can't do everything together. So it does take quite a few months to pass the rites over, doesn't it?
Yeah. Originally, the Munay-Ki, it wasn't called the Munay-Ki. This is a modern term. Munay means to love, and Ki is kind of means system. But originally, these rites were given to these tribes people. They say they trace this origin of this narrative back 104,000 years from around 2012. And they, at some point, an individual in the tribe who you could call the shaman, would have received. Sorry, I have dogs letting themselves out. My husband's going to turn up any moment, but he's just going to quietly come in. Unfortunately, I can't say the same with the dogs. So the shaman would have received these rites from Source. And this was a process all across the ancient shamanic world, from Siberia through to the Americas. and would have started to deliver these rites to the tribe from maybe from an age of around 12 or 13, when they reach a time when they're started to be seen as adult. And they would have passed those rites over a quite long period of time. So there'd be rites of passage for maybe one a year, and maybe a number of particular key times of aging. And when they this kind of process was held unchanged, as I understand it, for thousands and thousands of years. But in the mid-50s, there was a particular group of people that are kind of been described as the Laika tribe. And then that means the mountain people. And you already had the jungle tribes and all of their medicine and wisdom, but you had the Laika tribe, and they emerged in the foothills of Machu Picchu sometime in the 1950s. And people recognized them by their dress, and eventually by their language, which was completely unknown to most people because it was the ancient indigenous language before the Spanish came. So in most of South America, well, all South America, the indigenous language, the common language is Spanish. In some parts, it's classic Spanish, like in Argentina, very similar to Spain. But in all of the other countries, it's dialects, different forms of Spanish. And but they had their own language, pre-Quechua, which is the indigenous Spanish that emerged. And so they had to work through several translators. There weren't many people who knew this old language. And then generally the modern people in Peru assumed that these tribes people, they knew of them. The people that lived in the high mountains, but they thought they'd all died out with the Spanish conquest, because no one had seen them for 500 years. Which is in itself quite amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they emerged in the foothills, recognized by their clothes and the language, and with some translation, they told their story, which was that Source had guided them, that they needed to come out of their hiding places. And you can, Alberto Villoldo, who I must mention at some point, but I won't digress, he likens this to the Buddhist monks coming out of their high up mountains and priests coming out of their cloisters to share more. So they were invited by Source to come out and to share their prophecy of the new human, that there was a great change coming. At the same time, humans were going to evolve into what's been called this Homo luminous, which a human that would be operating at a higher level, would have more ability to communicate without words, to be more connected to Source and higher vibration. And the kind of the message they got from Source was that they needed to come out. The world he needed to hear their message, because everything had become very dark for the last few thousand years, and to break up that dark energy and to prepare the way for this new human. And I think when you look with hindsight, they're talking about the same people that we look at in our kind of modern light work community as the rainbow tribe, the indigos, these young people born that seem to have an innate spirituality that doesn't get pulled into the dungeon programming of what I see was more modern religions like Christianity and so on.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're all saying the same thing, and yet people come to spirituality in the way that's right for them. But most of our ancient indigenous understandings have been erased, in time, and yet these teachings have been guarded for thousands of years in their natural form. So they came out in the 50s, and they were met by a number of people and they would speak to anyone who would give them the time, and they would pass the rights to people, partly to share in that experience and that energy, but also to make their way in the world, to be able to spread the message. They couldn't survive in their indigenous ways in the mountains, out down in the flat plains. So, and now we have the grandchildren and the great grandchildren of those pioneering shaman that came out. But back in the 80s, they met a guy called Alberto Villoldo, met this group, and he was in South America. His business there was, he was a medical anthropologist, and he was studying psychosomatic disease, and he was looking at Amazon plant medicine and other practices when he came across this tribe, and pretty much invested then the next 25 years in traveling with them and learning about their experiences. And he gathered from them this body of prophecy, this story, and the rites themselves. And he also, he didn't really make this clear at the beginning, but he has since, but he also garnered a lot of the shamanic practices from all across the region of the Andes. So much of the Munay-Ki isn't just from this tribe. But he did ensure that he got full permissions to bring this system together. And the problem was that, as I said earlier, because these rites were given over such a long period of time, maybe your whole teenage and early adulthood, it may take 10 years to receive the rites.
Yeah.
The message from the Laika when they came out in the 50s was the world doesn't have time to wait. Something needs to be done now. And so they agreed when they met Vololdo, when he talked through, and they realized his ambition to help them to help them to share this process. Because unlike many Dutch indigenous groups, Westerners coming in and taking a hold of something and especially reinterpreting it for their own, and then selling that, to make a living, it would be called misappropriation, cultural misappropriation, and it's frowned upon. Whereas this group came out basically shouting, please take this out to the West. Take this out to the people of the air. That's what they call us, the Westerners, with planes and everything. And their mission was to find the most succinct way and the fastest way to get this information out. So it was with their blessing that Vololdo put together the Munay-Ki, which is this series of 9 initiations. At the same time as he did this, he had a group of highly trained Western people who had trained in the indigenous ways, because first he trained himself in the original ways, the teachings, and he trained a group, and he tasked them with helping him to put together the Munay-Ki. And there are some articles about this, and I'll give you some links. But there was some resistance because of the idea of supervision, that once you share these rites out in a very simple form, in a shortened form, and then there's no follow-up or years and years of shamanic training, that this could go badly wrong. But more latterly, that they have agreed, this early group that trained with him, that actually the Munay-Ki, the essence of these rites is so strong that it survives the reinterpretation if the embodiments remain the same in the teachings, which is my passion, really, to keep it true. And so it's really been endorsed by a lot of people sort of fairly high up particularly in the US, in shamanic circles, people like Sandra Ingerman, for example. So now, in terms of timing and how long it takes, to get back to your question, you're talking about 6 months, because first of all, you need to meet the person needs to find a mentor. And a bit like in therapy, it's got to be sort of right for you, and that you make a connection. The mentor's job is to make sure the person has good intentions. They're not just looking to learn something quickly and go out and sell it like a cash cow, that they're going to honor the teachings. And they're just one tiny small part of shamanic practice amongst a huge, deep, reserve of shamanic teachings that people can access, in the right way. So need to meet people, do the right groundwork, introduce the concepts, and then if people still feel it's right for them, then I call that the introduction. I can do that in a group or individually, but it normally starts with someone making contact or being referred, and hey, can I talk to you about this? And I do most of my kind of checks and checking this is okay there. I don't like to advertise a group. People come cold and they make a decision there, but sometimes that's how it works when you get a group say, look, we all want to come, and that's more challenging, but you still have to go through that same process. And then I now do across 4 ceremonies. The foundation is 4 rites, and then there's the lineage ceremony, and then there's the 2 final rites which are linked to the future. But I now do the foundation in 2, and you get there the same length of time, to be honest, about 6 months. So 4 ceremonies, and then I usually do a separate training in learning how to gift the rites. It's a very practical day, but yeah, so that's sort of the process. The content of it all would take a lot longer to explain.
Yeah, I mean, when I received my rights from you, I remember I came to you from mediumship background, so I trained in mediumship, and the next part for me was the Munay-Ki. Now, when I came and sat with you and you showed us how to do a fire ceremony and open sacred space, I remember being sat in your house and all of a sudden thinking, I feel so different. But I'd actually gone like, when you've had an alcoholic drink and you feel like just your body goes right relaxed, and I sort of felt like I knew exactly where I was, and I knew I should be exactly where I was, and everything were just calm. It was so like aligned. It felt so right. And I know that when I said to you at one point, I said, I feel like I've almost been drinking it. It felt so relaxed. And you said, that's sacred space. That's what, because we've opened sacred space.
It's like I have this term now distilled down to basic denominator that I've got from somebody else. That's another story. But it's like you strip everything out, create sacred space, and you get everything down to its base denominator. And this is very similar to when people create in Wiccan circles and in Druidry, where people will create a circle. But this essentially cuts out all middlemen. So you're not talking to the goddess of the waterfall or the tree, the energy of it. It's very, but it is trees actually. It's very specifically the connecting with source through Mother Earth and through all the elements that exist through Mother Earth. And there's 5, which is earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, light, if you like. And these are seen in ceremonies, in Druidic ceremonies, which are essentially drawn from older shamanic practice. The whole idea of drawing a circle and creating a space within which you can work with source. The only difference is in Andean spirituality, is earth-based spirituality. So it's straight to source. To make that space and that connection to divine is through the Mother Earth. And that this is why in the particularly in Andean shamanism, but you also see it in North American shamanism and elsewhere, there is such an emphasis on gratitude and offerings to Mother Earth to say thank you for all that sustains us, because there's this recognition that we are everything of the earth and the stars. Oh, my hair stands on end. Do you know when you say something and you get your hair stands on end? It's like source doing an underline.
Yeah, it's like confirmation, isn't it? Yeah.
And it does. It kicks everything else out, because it just simplifies it all down, and you're in this space.
I came to you from, like I said, mediumship background, but when I did my rites, when I received my rites and what have you, I noticed massively that my readings changed, a lot changed, and then my healings changed massively. So everything seemed to almost level up. Things were clearer. The connection was clearer. The information I was receiving seemed a lot more detailed. Do you hear that a lot, or?
Yeah, yes. I think it's because there's you're immediately gifted a lot of assistance.
Yeah.
Now it's the same assistance that you access for people to know how to access your guides. And it's I get people get upset when I say this, because it doesn't take away anything from the power of what they're doing. But a lot of the things that people do to access spirituality are tools rather than of the source itself. So things like using crystal healing or tarot or divining are tools to access source, but they're tools that you're employing. Whereas when you use earth-based spirituality, the tool becomes the earth, and because that's part of you integrate, and so it doesn't get switched off. So as the minute that you kind of access this source-based technology is kind of an interesting word, but that makes it like something. You kind of become the earth. You become as one with it. because you join these lineages that have done the same, and they almost, by joining with them, you become everything that they are. Best way to explain it is for example, in the rites, the foundation introduces you to a lineage of healers, and these are the first Laika from thousands of years ago, who through that such strong spiritual connection to Earth, so unpolluted with the darkness that we see in the human spirit over the past thousands of years, they've been likened as the original Garden of Eden. Some people say they didn't even wear clothes because they didn't even have concern about what other people thought. They had these 5 principles, which are now is non-violence, truth, integrity, moderation, and generosity, and all of that is about just being a good person. And that because they lived like this, they're rewarded with these processes, and they just lived the most beautiful life. They lived a plant-based diet. They thanked the spirit of the plant, anything that sustained them, they were grateful to, and this is what enabled them to become as one with all of the world of what Mother Earth is, and so you have this connection, and it remains with you 24/7. It's there with these lineages you connect to. For example, the lineage of healers. Once connected, and you need to ask them. That you need to acknowledge them, and so in your meditation time, or when you do a fast ceremony, or before you go to sleep, you call on them, to come and to heal you in your dream time, in your meditation time. And this brings you closer to them, brings that connection closer. So eventually they walk with you all the time. They walk with you, and you just know they're there. And then there's some lineages from the past 3 groups: day keepers, wisdom keepers, and earth keepers. And similarly, they're an ancient lineage that's been brought forward and passed on and connected with. And so we're in that line now. We're part of that lineage. If you receive the gift of this lineage and you embody it and make that, and to do all this, you have to live by these 5 principles. As soon as you move away, and soon as you move into violence, or neglect your environment, or greed, and all of those, that you're the wall will come up between you and that connection. And so, but for people that are drawn to spirituality, generally that's easy for them. Generally, that's who they are. They and then and people often feel. That's why people often feel, well, they feel they found their home.
Yes.
With Munay-Ki, because it does become a way of life, and then it starts to support and raise the energy and everything else that you do. So you find that your the way in which you use your tools and your access to mediumship, and that everything feels clean and easy, and does that make sense?
Hi, I'm just taking a quick break to thank you all so much for listening to the podcast and for all your lovely support. If this episode gave you something to think about, or simply felt helpful, you can support future episodes and my tea habit over at Buy Me a Coffee. The link is buymeacoffee.com/guide to spirituality. Every little bit helps me keep creating, sharing and growing this space, and I'm truly grateful. Yes, total sense was that. It did. Like when you said there about, it's like you've come home. It seemed like it was just the natural way for me. And when I call the archetypes and when I work with the archetypes, when I'm opening sacred space and before readings and healings and that sort of thing, they actually represent to me in my third eye. So it's almost like a nod that they're there. I know they're there anyway, but it's like a nod that they're there. So I don't know. I just feel like everything seems more connected with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
So how did you get into the Munay-Ki then? How did that come around for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the way I got in makes a huge difference to how I've been able to give it the focus that I have. I'm 60 now. Oh, so I keep getting messages on my screen. I'm 60, just turned 60. And I think for the first 40 years of my life, I was on the edge of so many different aspects of spirituality, but I never had the space to get into any of them. I remember as a young girl, age 6 or 7, being really enchanted with silence. And I loved it when the house was empty and I'd sit down with a piece of paper and just make marks on the paper. And the sound of the pencil it used to make me go into a bit of a dream. And I just entered this kind of liminal space and I really resented it when I was pulled out of it, like my brother came in or anything like that. Um, and then I got into my teens, and I didn't really give spirituality much thought until I read Herman Hesse Siddhartha, and that pulled me up to thinking about the whole notion of a soul, that I'm a soul, and then I kind of already figured out that my soul and my body were not the same thing.
Yeah.
I figured that out quite early on without any kind of help. And and then there's the kind of surrounded in the Western world as we are by Christianity. There was this notion of living your life, as a soul in a body, and that your body goes to the earth, and then you go to heaven or hell depending how you behave. It never really resonated with me. I couldn't connect to that, and then I got it in my late teens at 19, 20. I got into mental health nursing, and I spent 35 years doing that. You couldn't get something more on the other side of the coin, psychiatry and psychiatric medicine, spirituality and shamanic teachings and healings. And it never, and the only reason that I stayed in psychiatric work, I use that term deliberately as opposed to mental health, which is not just the province of doctors and nurses and trained professionals by any means. You do mental health work every day. Every time you see a client, you're so there's a distinction, but it's like, stop it. Psychiatry, I always made the bells ring. It's such a shrill bark. It's like they can hear Pete's car. So psychiatry is very oppressive. People's rights are taken away. People are in torment, and they are then from Victorian times removed from society because people don't want to see that. Push it away, and it's not our problem. And people were literally put into asylums because they were a problem. So they got pregnant or something, women especially. So that was the evolution of that service. But I came in on the back of a really buoyant time. The same for shamanic work and all the spirituality of the 60s. It brought in this whole thing around counselling and therapy and the individual rights and empowering people to grow, and intrapsychically. And it wasn't just about containing their symptoms so they behave themselves out on the streets. And I really bought into that. And so I stayed in it, 35 years, I stayed in it to be a force on the inside because all the good people bail out. But it really took its toll. And if it wasn't for the fact I kept my hand in with this notion that there's something else, which if you talked about in mental health, in psychiatric terms, they'd probably section you, if you started talking about
you become the patient.
So I had to keep quiet about that in my day-to-day job. But I always maintained a bit of a circle. And I used to say, in my late 30s, when I had a bad day, I'd say, all I want is a little crystal shop and sell crystals and have a little healing space at the back. Because there used to be a little shop called Rainbows in Bishop's Waltham near where I lived. Used to live near Winchester. And it had that you went in front of house was books and crystals and a lovely lady sat behind the counter there. And then there was a door and the door was removed. So it was an entrance. You were just drawn in. There was all sofas around and sometimes people would be playing an instrument or there'd be a meditation starting. And so, you'd sort of be a sign saying, come in quietly, but come in. And it was just wonderful. You could just sit there and someone would make you a drink. And generally people bought something for the shop and that sort of was the quid pro quo, it was free. And I just thought, what a wonderful thing to do. And then I moved up here. I had my kids, and it made me kind of step back a bit because I couldn't go. I couldn't go back down south to the job that I was on maternity leave from, and so I took the nearest job I could get, which was like a ward manager, community manager grade. And I hated it. I didn't have this support that I'd been used to in previous jobs. And I had an opportunity to get out through a kind of like a resignation scheme. They were over-established with managers, and so and they basically give you salary up front to leave, and then they close your salary in year two, and then they say they make their savings. But it gave me an opportunity to kind of step out. And Peter just sold his house, and so we bought Crystal Space, the shop. I think that's where I met you.
Yeah.
And I got all my crystals, and then I started just looking around for people to come. And we had this like Thursday club called Our Space. The group still exists on Facebook. It's just an online one now, but it's still there. And every Thursday I'd get different speakers to come. And I used to learn a little bit about this or that, everything from Buddhism to metamorphic technique, the tapping thing.
Yeah.
Oh, there was so many. Do you remember, I don't know, from sort of 2012 through to 2016, it was just explosion of spirituality and different techniques and a lot of earth-based spirituality stuff. And I found myself kind of knowing all sorts of things, and nothing really grabbed me. And then one day, Emma, a lovely friend of mine who used to do our Druid ceremonies every 6 weeks, the Sabbath ceremonies, she said, I've got a friend down south who's received something called the Munay-Ki, and is offering to come up if I can gather a small group together to make it worth his while to come to teach it. She said, would you like to do it? So I went away, and she gave me a name and a link, and I went and had a look. And I watched this video for about 5 minutes, and I just thought, I'm doing this. Nothing had ever grabbed me like that by the throat.
No.
There was no way I was saying no. And I rushed back. I remember rushing back saying, desperate, because I thought someone else, because she only had 5 spots. I agreed to do it at Crystal Space. So, and that was, I was very lucky to be asked. There was 5 of us on the course. And we did it over a weekend, which with hindsight, I wouldn't recommend anyone do, because the work I had to put in on my own in reading and trying to grasp some of these concepts that I'd kind of been taught at the top end. This is the Munay-Ki and this is what you do. But you do need a bit of a base work, and you can get that if you do it more slowly. In the same way as the shaman would slowly teach his protege, his young people as they grew up in his tribe, would slowly teach them the ways. You can take your time, you can introduce it, and the concepts flow throughout the ceremonies. But I had the whole thing in one, and the only thing that I could remember, because I remembered nothing about what happened, so I had to go watch all the videos, and then it all came back to me. And I had a manual, and then I kind of reverse engineered it from the manual. And everyone has to do that, because there is nothing except the receiving of the rights and the teachers and how to pass them on. And you are wholly dependent on your mentor to deliver that information correctly and to teach you in the way that Vololdo first laid these rights out. And there are videos out there to this day, and they're still where I would say for people to go. And lost my thread. What was I saying? What was I saying? Oh yes, about the timings. Yes. Oh yeah. I did this 2 days, and I couldn't remember anything, and I had to build all that afterwards. And I was fortunately I wasn't working. I had my shop, and Emma had the time, and so we'd spend 2 or 3 hours twice a week. We'd come at the shop when I'd shut and open space, and we just worked through it until we lived and breathed it, and did ceremonies at home every day in between. And that not many people have that time to do that. Very few. If you've got young kids, or if you work. I didn't have a day job. And so it's, but when I did these 2 days, and I was absolute whir in my head. And I walked out of the shop, coming out with everyone else, and I turned and locked the door, and I turned around, I looked up, and this might have been what you were describing. And I just got this sense of suddenly being in the whole everything. Everything just felt complete. And that I suddenly felt a part of absolutely everything that was around me. And that's never left. I got used to it. But I still get it if I go outdoors, if I take my shoes off, if I stand on a beach. And we all recognize that feeling you get on top of a mountain. Yes. And then as you come back to real life and the buildings and the smog and the phone and the ringing and the TV and the kid, it all kind of evaporates. But it doesn't with Munay-Ki. It somehow... You create sacred space, and you can learn to do it in your head, and you can learn to do it in about 30 seconds, because you step out of that space-time paradigm, step out of that whole thing about linear time, and just imagine it. Just imagine the directions, imagine the energies, imagine you have fire in the south, represented by the serpent, um, and in the west is jaguar, and I mean, they're a little bit different to what we're used to actually in Druidic, so I won't confuse things by going through it. But as soon as you kind of just imagine these directions and these energies, it comes around, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was 2012.
Yeah.
That got me in, and then I just dedicated to it to the point that I am considered quite narrow, and I'm a little bit resistant to learning new things. But I see that as a good thing because I see myself as a bit of a guardian of the.
That's it.
I'll tell you about the net in a minute, but that's kind of part of that too. Is guarding the process.
Keep it as original as possible, so that when you're passing it on, you know that you're passing on as near to original as you can. I like that. I don't think that's rigid. I think that would be, I think that's the best way to be with something so sacred. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And people try to change it to fit what else they're doing. I've heard of things like Munay-Ki Reiki, and I think it's much simpler if they just do their thing, but just embody the Munay-Ki in all that they do, including when they do yoga, including when they teach Reiki, including when they're holding a mediumship session or reading somebody's cards. You just you don't have to add any practice in that. You just embody it. It's like if you're doing healing work or Reiki, to start before, after you do your symbols, you call the healers. You just call them. Just imagine this circle of people walking towards you, then fanning out either side, and then eventually you form a circle with your hands. You put your hands out. You can almost feel that holding their hands as they join you, and you just hold that moment, and then away you go. And it's and you can learn to do that quite quickly. You know, this kind of to start to build it into stuff to the point now. I'm not aware I'm doing it anymore, but
it's just so natural.
I just sometimes if the archetypes, I'm very friendly with Quetzalcoatl because I'm the most chaotic person, and I used to write lists everywhere. I had lists, and I spent more time rewriting lists than doing things on the list, particularly when I used to work. This is before Munay-Ki. Now I don't write lists anymore. I just think about Quetzalcoatl, and whatever it is I'm meant to be doing comes into my head.
Yeah.
Really strange. It's like today I remembered, I wouldn't normally remember things like this, and I've stood people up for oh my God, we were supposed to have a call, or something, or go out somewhere. But if I yesterday, I literally said, if I need Quetzalcoatl, it just came into my head. And that's it. It's just been there ever since. It's been in my background, and that's the best way I can describe how they work with you. Sometimes you consciously express a wish to have some help from one or the other, from a lineage or from an archetype. But sometimes they're just there. They just offer themselves.
Yeah. So if somebody said to you right now, Ali, what is the best way if the Munay-Ki is for me, the best way that I can get into it, what would your advice be? Well, where would you tell them to look, apart from you, obviously?
Oh, right. Do you know what? I've been trying to retire for about 2 years.
I know, you kept telling me, well, I think this...
I didn't tell you, I'm not doing any more of this. And then I have people that I can refer people to, but they won't go. No, I want you in. Or because they've got some connection or other. And it's a little bit, I think, a little bit elitist thinking, well, that person's higher up there. But it really, the more people that can learn to give Munay-Ki and practice it and practice giving, the better. Because I've only got so much time, and then it slows down. And if you have a waiting list, there's something wrong. Because if you're giving the rights to enough people over time and you're teaching, you should never have a waiting list. There should be always somebody, unless there's a reason that they need you specifically.
Yeah.
Might be that they're a personal friend of yours. You're not going to charge them any investment.
Yeah.
But what I would say, firstly, is to watch Alberto, to go onto YouTube and to put in the words Alberto Violdo, which is Alberto as it sounds, and Violdo is VILL. Oh God, I need to. VILLOLDO. I just got some books here to show you.
Yeah.
This was Villoldo's first book, Dance of the Four Winds. It's probably reversed, isn't it? And he's all about when he first met his first shamanic mentor back in the 80s. Lovely book. And then when he put it all together, he did something called the Four Insights, which is from that he developed his Four Winds School on shamanic practice. And they do the medicine wheel, which is a 2-year course, starting, and they do a direction south, west, north, east, and each direction they'll do different practice. So they'll do Munay-Ki throughout the 2 years. You meet every 6 months, sorry, 4 times, and then the first one, the first wheel concentrates on things like sacred space, introduction to Munay-Ki, some of the rites, and soul retrieval.
Yeah.
The second meeting 6 months later, and they'd be working between and practice and supervision, would be on negative extraction of entities that have entered into the spaces where you've lost soul parts. So basically, the idea is that you're in a Munay-Ki and across all shamanic ideas really is that we are a soul in a physical avatar, a body, that we connect to source through our chakras. Now, the ancient shamans in Andes didn't call them chakras, but they used to call them portals, and they had an indigenous word for that. And their notion is that upon now this is a moot point really, and I don't want to get into it about when life is alive, but generally it's thought to be at conception. The male and female bodies blend, and then source invests, assists the soul to come into that union, and also invest a part of itself, and that's really important. So we're all part God. So when we're working at a spirit level, we are God. God is working through us. You know, we're all God masquerading as ourselves. Is the expression Vololdo uses. So we are us, our soul, our immortal soul, and we come into this life, and we have past lives, and at the end of this life we leave. But when we leave, our spirit part, the part of us as God, goes back to source. And that contains everything that is us in this life, all our connections, all our spirituality. But our soul moves on, which is why you can go to a medium and connect with the spirit of your dead grandmother, but she's been reborn as a Chinaman. Yeah. You have many lives, and the Akashic record will hold all of the information about every life back with source, and that is you. You're still there, your spirit part. But you have many spirit parts from many lives, and it's still all you. It's your units, but your actual soul moves on, and it's a kind of that's a concept that I hadn't really come across in that way until I came to Munay-Ki. I lost the thread of why we were talking about this. Where did this start?
So I was just asking how somebody would find how to get into the Munay-Ki.
Oh yeah. So if you go to Vololdo, he's done this wonderful video. He's done 2. There's number 1, which is a 15-minute intro, and then there's it's the Munay-Ki video 2. It's called, and it's 35 minutes long, and he introduces the background and history of these tribes that came from Indochina, the body of prophecy and the body of processes. But he also goes into the physiological and the metaphysics of the avatar, the 4 layers of a person that we have: the level of the physical, the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. And they're like in a Russian dolls and a hierarchy. So problems at the level of the body need to be treated higher up, the level of the mind and above. So if you cut yourself, you need nothing more than your mind to think, oh, I'm bleeding, and to fix it. But if you have a problem at the level of the mind, you need the level of next level up, the level of soul, which is the mythic, counseling, therapy, meditations, and so on. But then if you've got a problem at the level of the soul, and indeed any of the lower levels, the mind and the body, because we can fix spiritually, we can fix physical problems. So we know this through hands-on healing. All of the spiritual healing, all energy work is happening at the highest level of all, the level of spirit. So when you train in any practice, that's the level you're working in. You curse great express, and you're working as source, with source, for source in this spiritual domain. And you can heal all the lower levels. And then we get into difficulty in the West because we have a problem at the level of the mind or the soul, so we've lost through trauma, we've lost soul parts. That's where I was talking about, wasn't it? We've lost soul parts, or through stress and trauma, our mind is traumatized, and suffering. We try and fix it. We go in reverse and try and fix it at the level of the body with antidepressants, antipsychotics, alcohol, drugs, gambling, any distractions. And that's not healing. That's just putting a sticking plaster over and covering the problem up, and it will just move somewhere else and continue to torment and us to feel suffering and unhappy. So there's great healing in shamanic work, and it's very it's kind of designed so that you can come in, you kind of guided to come in at the right place, whether it's art, music, counseling therapy, which is that level of the soul, or whether to find someone that can access that spiritual, hugely digressed. Anyway, yes, Alberto Villoldi talks about all of this. Much of what I've said, he talks about the parts of a person and how it all works. And energy medicine, sort of a very brief introduction to that. In fact, Munay-Ki, the thing that I like about Munay-Ki, and I think this is really important to express, because this was me, I knew a bit about everything, jack of all trades, and absolutely master of nothing at all, except having too much to say. And the thing about Munay-Ki is, as a lay person who knows nothing about shamanism or any of that, can come and learn, receive the rites of Munay-Ki, and can learn to pass them on. I think they have to have two things. They have to be of the understanding that there is a kind of a creator, that there is that there is a spiritual world, and that there is a creator, and have to have an open mind to the notion that we can create a space within which we can work with source. And if they can suspend their disbelief for anything else whilst perhaps learning about that, then they've got, it really is something that everybody can just pick up. And I think it's one of the few things. Reiki is similar. You can learn Reiki and practice Reiki without having to spend years and years learning about the background,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's nice because you can come and and this is what's happened to me. I've become a specialist in Munay-Ki, pretty much exclusion of everything else. But it does mean that I've got this really good grounding and confidence in it. So that's handy because often I find that I do meet a lot of people in the network who've received the rights, like I did in a weekend, but they've lost contact with the mentor. It wasn't set up that they could have ongoing supervision, whereas I always offer free telephone support, come over to my house anytime and do a Munay-Ki refresher. I don't charge for those, and just keep that relationship, because it really is kind of for life, the mentor relationship, even though people never use that in that way. I've never known anybody from years and years ago still contacting me asking for my support, but the offer is there, and that's something that is another indigenous practice of that relationship of teaching. Although once you receive the ninth right, there is this notion of equality between you and your mentor, but there's still a way to go. But yeah, Alberto Villoldi's video is the best way to start, and then number 3, straight after that, is goes through video demonstrations of all of the rites, and he has a small team, some of which are still with him. Actually, Marcella is in those videos. They've since got married, and they're still together. She really has become the front face of Munay-Ki now, Marcella Lopez, and she does all the training and all the promo for Munay-Ki. Alberto is set back a bit, and he's doing a lot of writing and still doing his books and getting deeper into some of his stuff. But those are the videos to watch. And then if you see those and you get that feeling of, oh, this is really interesting, then your next step is to find a mentor.
Yeah.
And good place for that is to go to the Munay-Ki Network UK, which has grown from being just one network in the north of England. When I started, because I felt so strongly that this was something for everybody, and this was Alberto, what he said was Munay-Ki is for everybody, not for, you don't need to do decades of shamanic practice to do this stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it accessible. So we set up a network to kind of show Munay-Ki to more people. And very slowly I was starting to come across other mentors in other parts of the country. So we started to develop new networks. And now there's about 25 networks all across the UK. We've also got a couple in the US, Peru, and Scotland as well has its own network. And the idea is that they're kind of led by people that have received Munay-Ki and offer it as teachings. They don't kind of own the network, but they admin it and support new members. And any members in those area networks, if they do Munay-Ki, can then advertise their sharings if they want to teach it. And we also have in the description, the list of networks, there's also, although it's by no means complete, a list of mentors with a little bit about information about their background. But the best thing to do is to go on the network and shout out, I'm interested in Munay-Ki. Is there anybody
near me? Yeah.
I tend to see most of those. And if nobody comes up, nobody responds and says, hey, yes, I'm in Devon and I've got a ceremony coming up, I can sort of come in and see if I can help them. And there's a website, but it's not hosted. It's linked on the Facebook page, but that's got a little bit about the process and a direct contact to me. People could email me and I can try and fix them up with a mentor.
Brilliant. That's perfect. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Ali. It's been amazing. I always love talking to you. I always think with you, the things that you have forgotten, you've forgotten more than I'll ever learn in my bloody lifetime. Do you know what I mean with this, with Munay-Ki? But thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I bet we've eaten up over an hour.
Yeah.
Well, we lost a bit in the middle, didn't we? Oh, it's been fun. It's been fun. And you barely scratched the surface. There's... But yeah, if people are interested, do you have somewhere where you put links for?
Yes, I'll put them on the feed, on the Facebook page, and then people can go on. If it's something they're interested in, we can put some links on then, and it's on YouTube channel as well. So
I'll send you afterwards. I'll send you the links to the 2 YouTube videos of Alberta Viloldo's. And I'll send you the Facebook link for the UK group, and then you could just go from there, because there's a list in the description of all the different networks. They should spot somewhere near them. But if they just want to shout out, or people find me in the members, I think you can message me directly. But I can only really do one group a year.
Yeah.
And sometimes 4 or 5 people I might take through the 6 months, starting in the spring, because where I live, it gets a bit inaccessible in the winter. And then just go into sort of over the winter sort of supportive mentoring. And then we have our monthly free Munay-Ki refreshers and shares. And anyone can come to them, really. Come and watch if they want. But yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Stacey. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to me, Stacey Bauer, on Guide to Spirituality podcast. If you enjoyed this chat, feel free to follow, share, or leave a review. It really helps. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and keep showing up for you. See you next time.